Alright, welcome back to another IGB100 video. This video is a special one as it's basically an extra content video made several years after the first batch, as you can probably see by the date in the bottom right. I am using a new fancy version of Unity and a better microphone these days. So time has passed, as it does. In this video we are going to quickly go over a number of student requests over the years. These include changing the skybox, aiming at the mouse, shooting multiple projectiles, and finally a link towards another resource I made involving more advanced weapon mechanics. And I'll talk a little bit briefly about that here. So before you start, you should be up to date on Cycle 1 content, and you should finish everything else first. I would also download the additional zip files from Blackboard that has the assets we will use today. These are the Cycle 1 assets.zip, and if you want to implement more interesting weapon mechanics, the Advanced Weapons Mechanics Redux Package 2. So do note that this is a separate project and video and should not be integrated with your project directly, this Advanced Weapon Mechanics package. So you should aim to do it separately. But I would then copy the ideas you want to use from it into your Cycle 1 project because they are very relevant. Alright, I'm going to start this by essentially exploring the IGB100 Cycle 1 extras.zip, which again you can find on Blackboard, and just putting that content into our project directly. Now this is two files. First of all, a look at mouse script, which I will get to later. Put that in your scripts directory, as well as the Skybox Volume 2, which is, as you can imagine, a skybox. Put that into your Skybox directory. And you can probably just drop that in your Unity project assets folder anywhere, but I like to be a little bit more precise for housekeeping purposes. So let's just close all that. Unity will take a few seconds to think about it, and once it's done, we're going to start this off by, first of all, switching the skybox. So what is the skybox? I mentioned this, I believe, in the first video, but it is this thing that we're looking at right now. And this texture material that encompasses everything is actually a material that's assigned in a cubic fashion. There are 6 sides to this material that are stitched together in a somewhat seamless fashion using a very particular shader. And I believe if we go to, I think it's in this directory, right, this one, we can actually have a look at the 6 images itself, which are these 6 here. And we may be able to access the actual material in question, which is putting them all together. So when we replace a skybox, or maybe just add a new skybox generally speaking, we're looking for material that has 6 images typically assigned to it. There are some other forms of skyboxes that we can use as well, but typically they come in this format here. So the directory we added an additional one in this directory. These are the 6 images and material here. To adjust the skybox in your project, what you need to do is go to the Windows, Lighting tab, which I already had up here. I'll just make this a bit bigger. And essentially you want to adjust properties under Environment, specifically the one that's your skybox. In this case, we already had a predefined skybox for you. We're going to change that to the new skybox, which I believe in this package is called DSB, and just select it like that. And assuming everything works fine, which it should, I mean, I'm the one giving you this, it'll change the skybox appropriately, and if you press play, it will function as per normal. Cool, it is scrolling slightly. Excellent. So the next thing we're going to do is add a script to our player that is essentially going to make the player target the mouse the entire time, which is what you might have seen in the demonstration video of Retaliator that I was showing you in random clips throughout this series, which is pretty good. Sometimes you don't just want to aim straight ahead. That's like the traditional SHMUP format from, I guess, like the 1980s, 1990s. It's a little bit more advanced to aim at the mouse, but also the benefit of that is, well, quite obvious. I'm just going to disable these enemy spawners while we check this out. So, I have given you a script that we put in the scripts folder. That script is called look at mouse. You can add it like so, and we'll just have a quick look at what this script entails. So first of all, this script simply spawns a plane at the same level as the player, which in this case is just the thing that you have this script attached to. And it sets up a ray from the camera to the mouse position. From here we then raycast from the plane location to this position and make the player look at where these 2 points intersect. So specifically we're talking about this section here. So what it does is it spawns a plane, we raycast to that plane's position, and then we raycast from the plane's position, which again is at the point of the player, to the mouse point, and assuming those two intersect, we get the player to then look at that point, which is this final line here. And that's it. That's all the look at mouse script is. If we go back into Unity and press play, you can see that functionality playing out here. Now what you might notice is that I put this in a fixed update. Now fixed updates, we kind of use them for important calls, but they're ones that don't necessarily need to occur every frame. I guess that's maybe the best way to describe what a fixed update is used for. It's like, this has priority, but we don't want it to chew up too much computational power if possible. So something that's essential, like looking at the mouse, is something you could put in a fixed update. So keep that in mind. Alright, for the next part, which is multiple projectiles, we're going to do something a little bit more fun and a little bit more interesting. So you may have seen, again, from the demonstration videos I've probably given you, that the ship that I am shooting from is shooting multiple projectiles at once of the same kind. To set that up, we actually need to use a slightly more complex data structure, that being an array. You could use, I don't know, some other kind of container for that, but an array makes more sense in this case because we're shooting from a specific location every time. So to do that, what we might do is set up some individual game objects on our player. And just for a lack of a better name, I'm going to give these the name muzzle, like a weapon muzzle. Muzzle 1, just call it muzzle in this case. I'm going to duplicate that. Hang on, is that where I want it to be? Yes, excellent. I'm going to duplicate that. Let's make it 4 times just to make it a little bit more interesting, like so. And I'm going to position these at some slightly different places on our ship. And we might put this at like, I don't know, -7, perfect, and 7. So as you can see, I simply have just put 4 empties on our ship, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Maybe we'll rotate the number 2 and 3 as well, just to make it slightly more interesting. -25, and make it 25 on this one. So they're kind of aiming in a slightly different direction. Cool, so these are going to be the 4 places where we are going to shoot projectiles from at the same time, using the same code we already have set up for firing projectiles. So to do this, we will need to script it, of course. Anything mechanical needs to be scripted first before we can play around with it. And as I mentioned before, we're going to use an array. Now you may have at this point started using an array for some reason in your project. If not, this will be a really good opportunity to show you how they can work and how you can make some slightly more interesting mechanics with arrays. So go back to your player script, which should be attached to your player. And we're going to add a public game object array, and we're just going to call it muzzles, like so. Now what we will need to do here, similar to the game objects like projectile, where we drag prefab in later, we will need to go back, make sure the script compiles, and you should get a muzzles array appearing. We're going to give that a index number of 4, which will give you 4 potential slots to put the muzzles in this array. You can just assign them like so. I mean, you can do them in any order. For this mechanic, it's not really going to matter, but later on it might, so do keep that in mind. Cool. So that's set up our array of muzzles. That should work easily with what we're about to do. Now, let's go back to our script and scroll down to, I believe, where we had shoot. This needs to change. The first thing I'm going to do is that using the spacebar here becomes a little bit weird if you start aiming with a mouse. I'm going to change this to mouse button 0, I believe it is. We'll just go with 0. And we're no longer just going to instantiate a simple projectile. We want to instantiate these projectiles from where our muzzles are attached to our parent game object, which in this case is the player. So I'm just going to comment out that line. We are going to reuse it in some way, but I'm going to replace it with a for loop. So for this for loop, I'm going to start by declaring the loop header by using an integer. I'm just going to call it I for this, and I'm going to set it to 0. I'm going to make it so that the condition for this loop is that I is less than or equal to the muzzles, which is the array that we just declared, its length, and if I'm going to use less than or equal to, I'm going to have to use -1 there too. Mostly because arrays, again, index from 0, so keep that in mind. And I want our array loop to increment, so I++ at the end of that. Cool. Now from this point, because I now am using a loop within this conditional that will loop through every index of this array positively until it gets to the end of the array, I simply just take our instantiate line, like so, put it there. We're still instantiating a projectile, but instead of instantiating it at the transform.position, I actually want to put it at the, I believe, muzzles array with the index in question, which in this case will simply just be I. And I believe that should be transformed because we're talking about a game object first. So muzzles I.transform.position. And we can copy that again and put that over here. And we obviously don't need transform there. Cool. That should work as intended, and I think that's all we need to do there. We might just put a comment just to show you that this is the loop. Loop through muzzles array shooting projectile from each. Excellent. Doesn't look like we have any errors. If we go back, make sure everything is compiling happily, muzzles are set up. If that's empty, you will get errors. And let's see how we go. Perfect. That is the behavior we want. Doesn't that look much cooler than before? Much more lethal as well. Excellent. So the final part of this is actually just going to be a link to a different package project that I set up, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So this is a separate package not related to this Cycle 1 IGB100 content, but this video will essentially show you how to make a laser beam using line renders, as well as self-guided missiles that have the capacity to track down a target, as well as dealing area of effect explosion damage that scales, I guess, based on the distance from the center of the explosion, which is how a real explosion should damage things. So these are mechanics that are on the complicated end of things. They require a little bit more scripting, to be perfectly honest. But they are pretty staple to any shmup as it becomes more complex, and are pretty evident in the shmup that I created and use as sample footage in these videos. Speaking of which, maybe as a final kind of wrap up to this content, that shmup, the one that I have demonstration footage of, that's actually a real game. It is greenlit on Steam and you can demo it if you so desire. I'll have some links in the bottom of this video. Yeah, so hopefully one day I will actually get around to finishing and releasing that, perhaps this year. So that's it for the additional shmup content video. It's only a short one. If you do have any other requests, please ask your tutors, and if it's popular enough, I may end up making another one of these. Cool. Have a good one.